press start.
Oh my God.
I forgot to press start. This interview is almost over. And wow, did we have some insightful answers. We actually figured out.
Too.
I know. We figured out the meaning of life and all that. And now we have to start over again.
Welcome news if we had made some big bloopers.
So anyway, here we go again. And so here I'm Jackie Brown, the person who doesn't know how to press start. And I'm also the compiler and the editor of the book 19 Tales of COVID-19, which together, 4 of us here, as well as there's 15 others who have stories in it, we told our tales about life in the early part of the pandemic, because when we started the project, it was actually in February. And then the next week or two after we had decided what the topic would be, because we had decided for these compilations, and this is the first of them, that the themes or the subjects would come from the headlines. The only thing in the news in February of last year was that this virus, I don't even know that it had a name at first. I mean, when we first started. And so that's what we decided we would write about. So my tale is about kind of rips off my anxiety levels of like when we were forced into lockdown. And as a single mom, I was thinking, oh my God, what does this mean? Of course we all were, because hey, none of us have lived through anything like this. And so it kind of started with my anxiety about that. And then I went into what I'd learned as a Walking Dead fan. There's lots of tips on surviving apocalypses based on viral illnesses in that show. So I would say I have a PhD in WD, and I was using that to understand how to get through what we thought at the beginning would be a couple weeks. And I guess the other thing that I would say, based on how we started this before, was that we were also going to say something about our writing passion. So we're still in the throes, of course, of marketing COVID and using that to kind of riff off the other things we're doing. And what I'm working on is based on a direct order from Payushi over there beside me. And I help people get their stories out, which doesn't leave me much time to do mine. I mean, I'm so blessed in the type of stories I get involved with. But last week, Payushi says, hey, why aren't you doing your book? And I just thought, hey, why am I not? And so based on that, I'm excited about getting involved with my book, which is a thriller. And its working title is Unhinged. Now, see, there's less surprise this time. The last time they went, ooh, oh. Anyway. And next up is Payushi.
Thank you, Jackie. So my piece in 19 Tales of COVID-19 is called Checklist for the Next Pandemic. And as Jackie was saying, we wrote this in the early days of the pandemic when there was utter chaos, and the only things that people seemed to be reaching out for were toilet paper and hand sanitizer, and there was sort of an uncertainty on how to live through a lockdown. No one knew what to really get, so people were reaching for all sorts of things in a chaotic manner. And I wrote this piece it was meant to be a funny title on how to be better prepared for the next pandemic and what you should actually store up on. But at that time, I did not actually believe that we were going to live through not just one more lockdown, but seems like a couple of years of that kind of life in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And apart from this, I'm working on a novel which is romantic and is also based on a social issue. And with this awesome group, I have put down the first draft, and I'm hoping to get that out later this year.
Yes, and that'll be your second romance novel. The first one was published in what year?
It was published in 2016. 2014 originally. I self-published in 2014, but then it got picked up by a publisher in published in print in 2016.
Yeah. So we have all kinds of levels of of writing expertise in this group. Some newbies and people like our he or she who is like, this is like old hat now. Just kidding. Every book is like has its own challenges, and also it's as fun. It's a whole different ball game each one. So next up is Michelle.
Thanks, Jackie. So yeah, it's stories, life. That's one of the things that has always been something that's captivated me as a reader, as a child. I always reached for stories that I could relate to, that would help me understand or see what I was going through from a different perspective. And as I have had my career in social work, I have lived through many people's stories. And, the adage that truth is stranger than fiction is certainly true. And I've had this journey. And so my chapter in the compilation details a story, a journey of a challenging parenting relationship during COVID, right? And that process in that snapshot of time left. What happens, right? What happened from there? Fortunately, I could say in this case, there was a positive outcome, right? But for me, I am captivated by the stories. And so I am really grateful to continue to work with Jackie one-on-one in birthing, finally, my own story that I'm going to publish, hopefully within 2021, but certainly within 2022. But going on, building on stories, right? Stories both of my own life and lives of others that I've been involved with through my work, and in the hopes that it will help somebody along the way in the same way that I've been helped in how I pick memoir and other stories.
Yeah, because that's what's so cool about these stories, because they were all like done in that snapshot in like the first quarter of last year, really, and so or first quarter after March when everything shut down, and at that time, well, you were in the throat there. You were living through a very difficult time, which thank God resolved. But at the time of publishing, it ended like, oh my goodness, and so, and that's the same with everything. That thing, when you're in a storm, you don't know if it's going to be a long storm or a short storm or anything like that. And so I think these books will be great. This book will be great for posterity because it will really show this period of this pandemic that's still ongoing.
Well, fortunately for me, it will provide the starting point, right? Because at the ending of that chapter, things got much darker. And there were a lot more challenges before the situation turned around. So it's in that turning around and in that process that a different kind of story emerges that, will hopefully be
and that's the thing about memoir, because you look at a period in time, and you certainly did, and it's very intensely drawn, just as Linda's story is. So over to you, Linda.
Oh, hi, Frankie. I'm Linda. But I write under the pen name Frankie Cameron. My story in the compilation is really a sad one. It was about the loss of my mother-in-law, and she had a stroke right at the start of the pandemic, and we were not allowed to go to the hospital and be with her during her final days. So it was very sad, and we had to make the decision to withdraw life support, and it was very hard to do when we weren't seeing her, and we were only doing this kind of a thing, like a Zoom call where somebody was holding up a camera and we could see her that way.
Yes.
But I write. I've also finished my first novel, which is going to get published in May. May 27th, I think, is our deadline right now. I'm also working with Jackie. She's editing, almost done the first draft, I think, of it. And I'm in the middle of writing the sequel to that as well. And it's dystopian science fiction, kind of described maybe as the 100 meets the X-Men or something. It's written for the young adult audience, so kind of like Hunger Games or Scorched Trials, and that kind of nothing like those stories, but in the same kind of genre.
And Linda / Frankie has an incredible social outreach, as does Payushi. She's got really strong social media game. So you make sure we'll put up the link so you can follow them both on Instagram, and also join the email list, because Linda Frankie Frankie Cameron's email list, because the newsletters are really informative. And I'm just so amazed at how well she does it. If you're a writer and you're wondering how to do it, get on her list and you'll see that. And also follow both of their Instagram pages, because they are really, really well done and keep you engaged. Oh my gosh. Next time you have to teach us one of those dances, Payushi, so that we can do a video on that, perhaps. Yeah. And so the beautiful thing with the end of your story is that as it took us a while to actually get it published, you could report on how your family came together and celebrated her.
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have a celebration of life in September, when things had calmed down after the first wave, before the second wave started. So we were allowed to have 100 people, but we had it outside, and we rented a tent, and we social distanced and had masks and hand sanitizer. And we were so lucky that we were able to get it in. And we had music and speeches, and I really think she would have liked that better than having the funeral. I think because she liked to have a good time, and she liked to be social. So I think that was the perfect ending for her.
So does anyone else have anything that any ways where the pandemic brought something good rather than bad? Does anyone have examples of that?
Yes, for sure. I think in my case, I was expecting to send my son to school this year. He was turning 4, and he was going to go to junior kindergarten. And ever since he was born, I had been waiting for this time, and I thought he'll go to school and I'll get back to writing. So when initially I got to know that we're going to keep him home and he's going to do virtual school, it came as quite, it changed things quite a lot for me. And in the first weeks of the pandemic, when we thought it would pass, I found myself I'm self-employed, so I found myself trying to work while managing him. My husband and I would be in the office, and he would be spread out there with his toys and crayons, and he would keep coming to us asking for time. And we were all three of us getting stressed out. It was not working out for anyone. And I think a few weeks into it, I thought it through and told my husband that we're going to change the way we're doing things. I'll spend the whole mornings with my son, dedicated, and my husband will work, and then he'll be with him in the evenings, and I'll work in the nights. And I've been doing that for almost a year, and I think it made an incredible difference in my relationship with my son. I had not thought how much it would strengthen it when I would just be able to sit back and accept that he's here and I'm here, and we have to make the most of this time. And I'm not having to rush him into a daycare or preschool or send him to school. I think we just paused and learned to enjoy life and have picnics in the backyard and just do little activities that I would have otherwise never done. So for me, it really changed my relationship with my son, and it's been a big positive.
Right. Because one of the things you mentioned in your list is about hoarding yeast and flour for the next lockdown. And my son has become really good at doing baguettes. And so when we can keep him in a good mood, we have fresh baguettes daily. And they're time intensive. You have to do all this and that to make that difference between the crunchy top and the interior. And he complains that oven doesn't go as high as you're supposed to go to make true baguettes. But that brings us to Michelle, because your story is set in France, the one that you're working on now, the home of the baguette. So.
Yeah, so it's funny because a book club that I'm in, the book that we read last month, it's so funny how time is so weird during this pandemic. It's only been a month since we read that book, but it really brought home to me, when I was thinking of this story, this trauma line of my family, that I was thinking of this beginning point somehow being in the Second World War, and not realizing, okay, if I've been able to trace the family line back to the 1700s in this same town, that meant that they were also there during the First World War.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother's mother, her mother, right, was also a teenager during a war. Mm-hmm. And her mother was a teenager during that. And so this line went back even further. So it just added this additional layer, right, of thought, and wanting to know more, both about, and it's funny because I don't generally like war stuff. Like even,
yes,
in
I
school,
remember you. Yeah.
I would learn what I have to know in order to get by, right, yes, to do the exams. But I didn't really get engaged in the war aspect. And so thinking about this now, although there was always that piece, because I have a women's studies degree, right? So there was always the stories, again, connections, stories of women and their place in history. And of course, there would be those war ones, but I would really think, more so engage with their story and them as an individual, not necessarily the context in which the story was taking place. Mm. So now I want to know more about that too. Mm-hmm. Because this town where it takes place, where I know there were at least 3 generations of men of my family line who were butchers in this same little town, that didn't change because these ramparts were built in a star shape around the town in, I think, the late 1700s. And so when I saw it visually on a Google, the Google Earth maps or whatever, it was just so striking. And thinking that so much of that town, some would be completely different because it would have all been bombed out because of the wars, and other parts of it would have remained for hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. In which these descendants of mine remained in this tiny little town that couldn't grow any larger than the confines. So there's the research piece, in which is a challenge because there's language barriers, there's war, there's fires, there's all those things. That means records are missing and there's those disjoints. But I have been able to find some things. And then there's the story and all of the pieces that are unknowns, right? Mm-hmm. So it will, by necessity, have to have not necessarily fictionalized pieces, but more pieces where it will be my speculation.
Yes. Yeah, because what's interesting is that, you talk about the need for research, and I know Payushi had to do research for the social issue that she covers in her book. And Linda, your book involves a lot of research as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about the setting of your Hollow Edge?
My book is set in an underground bunker called the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. It's a real bunker that was built in the 1960s. It's built to 800 people can stay there. There's 4 lakes of water. There's a lake of diesel fuel. They have 2 blast doors that are they weigh 25 tons, 3 feet thick, that they can shut, and anything nuclear would bounce off the door. And it seals. They have a way to clean the air inside, so that if there was an aerosol attack of some sort, they can lock it down and clean the air, so the air would still be safe inside to breathe. Mm-hmm. It's a really, really fantastic place that I discovered, and I've done so much research, more research than I could actually put in the book, but
right. And so what came first? Did you find out about it first, or had you already started a type of story and thought, we're looking for a place to set it?
I started the story first, and then I found the setting, and then I did more research. I always said if I write again, I will always do the research first, because stopping to research while you're trying to write is time consuming. But
great tip.
It does make the story more authentic when you can put those little real details in it, even though it is a fictional story.
Okay, well, that's a great. So how about we wrap up, because this has been great. 4 writers here talking about their work in progress, plus a great book that that's in process. And what I want to say is how important it is for writers to help writers. So please, there'll be the link there. So please go and buy this book, because it's only $5.99 in the digital form. Although the paper form is so much more beautiful. So so please do pick up our book, and we've got some book launches coming up, including of Linda's will be soon enough in May, and Payushi's will be coming up. So stay tuned so that you can stay involved, and you'll hear more about what Michelle's story is. So as we wrap up, how about we do one writer's tip each? And Linda, you just said a great one, which is if you're going to do research, do it first.
Research first.
Yes. And how about you, Payushi? Is there one tip that you can give a writer? And put you guys on the spot a bit.
I'm thinking maybe for me, the authenticity of a location comes from me having been there. So I try and base my books in a place that I have actually traveled to, and I'm able to give it more of that local flavor just because I've seen. And tying that back to whenever you do travel to a new place, take a lot of notes, because when you are going to write your novel based on that location, those notes are incredibly handy.
Right. So, Michelle, do you have a writer's tip?
That's a great one, Payushi. I was just thinking about how I should have done that at a few of the places I visited, and I will do that if I ever travel again. But what I will say, particularly for myself and anyone who's writing about real stories and real people, that there is a fine line when you're writing about other people, and so to own our place in the story, and know that it's my truth, and that just because someone is a star or is a participant doesn't make them a star, right?
Yes.
And so, to get through that fear, most often, the reception isn't as you anticipate anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point, because I work a lot with people on memoirs, and they're very afraid of, what will this person or this person say? And that really makes it difficult to even write that first draft. So my piece of advice is write the first draft, worry about that stuff after. You can worry about those kind of problems in the editing phase. Thank you for spending.
Editor.
Yes.
A great editor will help work through it.
Right. So thank you for spending these minutes with us, and for celebrating again the launch of 19 Tales of COVID-19. So as we know that a book is, you keep at it for like 2 years. That's another good tip. When you get your book out, know that it's what's that phrase? It's a marathon, not a sprint. And, we're 6 weeks on, we're still plugging and pushing this fabulous book that we know that will be a great read for people who are living through it. And we think, and we know that 5 years down the line, when someone else is doing their research, that this will be a handy book for them. So they'll know what it was like in the beginning days. Thank you for spending